Hello and welcome back to Dr. Logic Awkwardly Does Logic in her office. Today I'm going to give you a definition of the syllogism. In the previous video, we defined the language for a term logic, consisting of categorematic terms and copulae that build them together, and a definition of a well-formed formula, or how to express categorical propositions by combining the terms and copulae together. Now that we have propositions, we can combine them and get arguments. So the only type of argument that we are interested in this system of logic is the syllogism. So let me bring up my whiteboard so that we can start doing some definitions. So we define a syllogism as follows. So a syllogism is a set gamma, so you might remember that from the notation video where we talked about the Greek alphabets, and the video on set theory where we introduced the notion of a set. A syllogism is a set gamma that contains two categorical propositions, but not just any two. They have to be ones that consist of three distinct terms, so distinct categorematical terms, one of which appears in both of the propositions, and the others in only one. So an example would be something like PAR-RES. We've got two categorical propositions, three distinct terms, P, R, and S. R occurs in both of the propositions, P occurs in only one, and S occurs in only one. So another instance would be, say, DIM and CEM. There's another one. The order of the terms doesn't matter. What matters is that we have three distinct terms and that they are distributed between the propositions in this way. Now, this is not the standard definition of syllogism. Standardly, in kind of contemporary modern logic textbooks, you would find a definition like this that also requires something like this, where the proposition below the line is the conclusion of the argument. We define a syllogism just to be the pair of premises because this is actually closer to what Aristotle does. He talks of syllogistic pairs giving rise to conclusions, and that the same syllogistic pair might have more than one conclusion that follows from it. So strictly speaking, we're going to kind of be closer to Aristotle when we make our definition. However, for the purposes of much of the rest of the discussion, we will generally have this conclusion that we include when we are talking about a syllogism. So the premise pair plus the conclusion. Now, given that we have these three different propositions, the three terms that occur in them, we're going to give names to the various terms because it will be useful to be able to refer to them in some of our future definitions. So first, you'll notice that there's the term that occurs in both of the premises. This is called the middle term. It's the one that kind of stands in between the other two terms and joins them together. It's what allows the syllogism to actually give you an argument rather than a list of unrelated topics. Then we have the term that is the predicate of the first premise, and it's also the predicate of the conclusion. This is called the major term. So it's the major one because it's the one that is kind of forming the predication. It's the one that is saying what is actually the case of something else. And then we have the last one, so the one that occurs as the subject of the conclusion and also occurs in the second premise. This one is called the minor term. So sometimes you might find kind of a generic representation of a syllogism like this. So P and then so M being kind of mnemonic for middle term, P for predicate of conclusion, S for predicate of, or sorry, subject of the conclusion. And then as a convention, we will always write the premise that contains the predicate of the conclusion first. So we will call this one the major premise and this one the minor premise, because the first one has the major term in it and the second one has the minor term in it. So this allows, you can already see that there are a variety of ways that you can construct syllogisms, but also that these number of ways are relatively limited. So I will say a bit more about that. Let's clear this whiteboard, and we want to introduce now the notion of a figure of a syllogism. So the figure of a syllogism is the relative arrangement of the three terms, the major term, the minor term, and the middle term within the two premises and the conclusion. So the figure of a syllogism is the arrangement of the terms. You can have the predicate term and then the middle term, followed by the middle term and the subject term, and then predicate term, subject term. That's one way that you can arrange that. Another way would be to put the middle term as the predicate of both of the premises. Another way would be to have the middle term as the subject of both of the premises. And then there's basically just the reverse of the first way, where you've got your middle term forming a diagonal, just a diagonal in the different direction. So you've got the middle term going this way, the middle term on this side, the middle term on that side, and the middle term on that side. These are the four unique ways that you can arrange the terms with respect to each other. And these are the four figures. So this is the first figure. This is the second figure, the third figure, and the fourth figure. But this just says something about the relative arrangement of the terms. These bits that I have written on the board are not actually syllogisms, because they're not actually, they don't involve categorical propositions, because I've got this little line in there. This is where the next definition comes in. So the next definition is that of a mood. A mood is a figure, so one of these four arrangements of the terms with copulae inserted. So I could take a first figure arrangement of terms and stick in an E and an I and an E and an O, and now that will count as a mood. So say A, E, O, A, I. So we've got things like P belongs to some M belongs to no S, therefore P does not belong to some S. Or M belongs to all P, M belongs to all S, therefore P belongs to all S. These are the sorts of arguments that we can represent, and each one of these is going to be a mood. Now, some of these are good arguments, some of them are not. So the big question is, which moods are good arguments? In order to answer that question, I'm going to have to define what the goodness of a syllogism is. And to do that, we'll have to move from the language of the syllogistic to the semantics. That is going to be the focus of our next video. So looking forward to seeing you then. Cheers.